Well, I'd like to introduce our panel here. We have Mary Connolly, and I have to look to see which group, Corrick Group Water Scheme in County Sligo. You're very welcome, Mary. You're very brave to take to the stage now and answer my questions. Seán, I don't know if Seán needs any introduction at all. Everybody knows him from Tydavnet Group Water Scheme originally. And we have Seán. Seán's from Glinsk Creggs, Creggs, County Galway. And a good over 20 years, I think, experience in the group water scheme as well. And we have Darragh Walshe, who's from the ICOS Society, who advises. So I suppose my first question, and I'll ask you all in your turn, I suppose, to take a stab at that, and it's to sort of explore what did you get out of working with the group water scheme for all of those years. Obviously, it is doing something for you when you've lasted so long. So Mary, I'll start with you. So what has been your favourite? What have you enjoyed most about working in a group water scheme?
I suppose there's a lot of pride in it. You want to learn a lot of things, and there's been huge changes. And I think it's seeing the changes and seeing the difference that it has made to a community. Like when I started off, we were turning on and off the water at night, and we were watching a reservoir, and we were taking frogs out of a brake tank. So to see that, to go to a DPO bundle, and to see the huge changes, and now everybody just expects potable water coming out of their tap. So maybe it's the pride in doing all that. And
now, shall we go back to the year that you started? So how many years ago was it?
Well, I moved to Ballinafad over 30 years ago. And I went to the first meeting with my husband.
1990.
Yeah, well,
thereabouts. Yeah, 30 years ago.
So, and that's how I started getting involved, and I've been involved ever since. I've been secretary on and off for the last over 20 years. Yeah. So we're a small group scheme. We're all voluntary, so we don't have a manager, we don't have a full-time caretaker. So we do all of the stuff ourselves. But there has been big changes, and there needs to be bigger ones.
Yeah.
But,
and how many houses have you got in your scheme?
We started off, the scheme itself started off in 1971 with 25 houses. And then in 1999, I remember we had a meeting, and it was in our sitting room. And we decided then we were going changing, and we decided to do a big job then. And it was just the start of this whole, the group water scheme, the federation and all that kind of stuff. And so we got a lot of money. And I remember it cost over 500,000 at the time. And I remember some members on the scheme I thought they were going to have a coronary there and then, like. But so we did all that, and then in 2005 we were a part of a DPO bundle in Sligo, and then Coffee Water are the ones who run our DPO, and since then it's we have 120 houses now on it. We're mainly domestic. We have a few farm connections, but there's no dairy, so there's no big users. There's no big commercial plants. Yeah. We don't have a school on the scheme. It's kind of a funny scheme because we're in Ballinafad, which is in County Sligo, which is on the shores of Lough Garrow, which is beautiful, and it's very karst. And we started off with springs, and now we're on an aquifer from under the lake. So there's has been a whole lot of challenges along the way.
Yeah, but a very complex operation, and as you say, great learning.
Great, it's learning.
Fabulous.
More to do.
Yeah. Now, Seán, what's your experience, and what has been the highlight for you in your long career?
I think I missed last year's conference here. I think we had a young lad getting married 2 or 3 days later, couple around, so I had no idea the format here. I hadn't looked it up, and Barry sort of asked me would I come along to reminisce, and I had no idea that I'd be sitting in an armchair looking out. All of these people probably have more experience all put together than someone like me. I suppose, like Geraldine this morning, her involvement in the group water scheme started with a phone call. I think Geraldine, you said at 10 o'clock at night. Mine started with the doorbell ringing at about 8 o'clock on a winter's evening, and the neighbour man who was on the committee.
Sorry. Go on, Seán.
who was on the committee, asked me would I come over to take the minutes of the meeting. I wasn't involved in the committee because the secretary at the time, and so he wasn't able to do it. So I couldn't refuse the neighbour, and I went along thinking, right, I'll go in and do a few minutes, and that'll be it. And I get back home again. But then, of course, the next meeting was a couple of weeks, and he came back to the door and he says, "You have to come back to read the minutes." Now, I think that was more reflection of my pure handwriting to say than anything else. Literally from there on, I've been locked in. That's in 1981. It was 2 years ago. And I'm still trying to get out, to be quite honest with you. And at 73 years of age, I probably at this stage should be long gone. But we've been involved in a number of projects. Very happy memories at the same time. We had some hairy moments, as we might say as well. But I think, as Mary said here, there's a certain satisfaction and a certain, I suppose, commitment. If you give a commitment, it's very difficult to walk back out of it. I think we're all like that. I mean, if you give a commitment to somebody that you're going to do something, it's very difficult to go back and say, well, sorry, I'm not available, I can't. No. Saying no is very difficult. And just thinking back over the number of years, the great Brian has been on quite some time to write a book on all this. There's a microphone going off. I've said we've got to wait till many people are read that. I don't want to be above the height with some because.
Just take your back out of the pocket and see if the interviews might be just try that for a second. Might be getting it like that. I'll change it for you.
Hello, 1, 2.
Yeah.
Technology. Barely operate the phone, never mind one of these things. But quickly, Brian had been on to me quite a while to put a lot of this stuff in paper because the amount of knowledge that we built up with all the colleagues and things. But someday we might just do that. I can share maybe in the context, back to my own scheme in a moment, but Barry mentioned, and it was very interesting to watch the formation of the Federation over the years, and you forget an awful lot of this. But I recall the great Bernard Keeley, and I don't think we would have ever got and I have to pay a tribute to Bernard, I don't think we'd have ever got the publicity of the scheme off the ground. I think he was very friendly with Jim Fahey. Jim was the RT reporter, Western Port, made the same recent years with the White Tash. So we were badgering away. I think we had the first meeting there in February. And we were meeting the minister the following Wednesday. So I was a civil servant and I couldn't be attacking a government, not really. Well, certainly not in public anyway. You have to be very careful not to attack a minister. But so Bernard and I were at the table and a few others, and Paddy might have been there as well. So we're meeting Brendan Howland, who was then minister. And Bernard kicked off, it was great guy, he kicked off, bang, bang, bang. He says, this is a disgrace for the national organisation and you wouldn't meet us and so on and so forth. So the minister eventually got a word in. He says, Bernard, sorry, hold it a moment. You were formed on Sunday. This is Wednesday, he says, and he says, you have no idea the queue of people that's waiting to get in. I was kicking Bernard under the table to sort of pull back, and do you know what his answer was? Well, you could have met us on Monday, he says. I think that enthusiasm was infectious. We probably hadn't time to come up for air a lot of the time. I recall Barry mentioned the tour in the country and trying to get people into the Federation. I recall one famous night down in Carlow, I think it was. If anybody here from Carlow, it's probably the month of November, maybe March, maybe late. It was frost and it was fog. So we were in the meeting and it was 12:30, 1:15 when we came out of the meeting. And poor Jerry Curley realised at that stage when he couldn't get into the car, it was covered in ice anyway. So when we got that thought out, he says, "Feck," excuse the language, he said, "Feck, I've no diesel." So to get back to Mulranny and Mayo. And the place were all closed. We did a quick tour around. But we went to the local Garda station and they used their influence to get a guy up out of bed and open up and give Jerry diesel to get back to Galway. So some of those incidents obviously stick out in your mind. But back to my own scheme quickly, like Mary, happy memories of it. The scheme was kicked off, I suppose, in 1981. Originally it was to be a dam up on the mountain, but the costs were so exorbitant it just couldn't, the grants wouldn't facilitate that. And the Geological Survey Office, I don't know if there's anybody here from GSI, but a great Bob Aldwell, who was then the chief geologist. So the consultants were Ray and Hanley from Galway, and they had started talking about groundwater to the committee. But the committee were wary of this. They thought maybe it was consultants trying to get out the door. But anyway, we did discover groundwater eventually, but we had no money to put down that first borehole. So quickly we had a meeting in the department arranged, and myself and the late chairman, Nicola Sherlock, attended that. And the department, after an hour or so, very, very kindly agreed to own the right to the first trail. And if there was no water there, they would fund that. But if there was water, it'd be absorbed into the total scheme. So the scheme was then constructed during the early 80s, 82, 83. I think the digging started in 83, following public procurement and all of that. And we had the official opening in 1986. I think we started with 470 houses. And today we have something over 1,000.
Really? And is it still voluntary, or are there paid employees in the Tydavnet scheme?
Are the people employed?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good question. How it came about is very simple too. I was working in the Department of Social Welfare at the time, so I was leaving Clones and heading off to Dublin as part of the career great thing. And so I had said to the rest of the committee, would somebody take over the role? Because I'd become assistant secretary, but because I was in the civil service, I was doing an awful lot of the paperwork. I think that the secretary was a very decent fellow, but he also farmed as well. So I think they looked to me to do a lot of the communication. Right? So I was leaving then in 83, I wouldn't be around. And so I did up a quick brief to employ a manager. And then we haven't heard about emphasis earlier about cooperative. So I was aware that good co-ops would have a manager and should have paid people. So I drew up the terms of reference, and we put an ad in the paper, but they came to me and said, well, look, we're in the middle of the grant, would you stay for another couple of months? And maybe we'd get the job done. So so they appointed me manager in 1983, which is 40 years ago now this year. But we had a great board, I should emphasise that from day one. Incredible people, and many people here today can identify with that. Great chairperson, total cooperation, great cooperation with the farmers to get pipes through fields. I think about 25% of our scheme is going through lands. And so people wanted water, and I think that involvement, people want something, they will come together and coalesce with. And I think all it requires is somebody just nudge that forward. So yeah, today we would have four full-time employees. I'm only part-time manager, and we have a full-time administrator, and we have 2 full-time maintenance people with 2 vans. Yeah. And the focus all the time is on conservation. If there's a leak anywhere, it shows up on the computer system, and so we tackle that right away. So we're in many respects, that is the big issue, and I mentioned it this morning. Conservation and the pressure on our sources today. I think conservation starts there. There's no point in them 30-40% leakage and be looking at for funding to put up another reservoir or to build another treatment plant. We have to keep the vast majority of schemes will be doing that.
Yeah, well, that's, I suppose, an opportunity for the future. Yeah. Thank you very much. It sounds that was very busy 40 years and a lot achieved. And I'm sure 1,000 households very happy that they have a secure water supply.
Don't tell us that, but
yeah. Seán, what's your experience? What did you learn, or what did you enjoy most about your work with Glinsk?
Well, I'm only very new to the group water scheme sector. I'm only 3 years as a manager. Full-time manager with Glinsk Creggs Group Water Scheme in the northeast of Galway, and some of our scheme transverses into parts of County Roscommon as well. My previous history is from the print and graphic design background, so it was a completely different change for me to come into water. But my father was one of the founding members of the scheme back in 1974 with his next door neighbour, in fact. So my experiences are fairly new, but I've been, there listening all through the years to the different stories going on and how the scheme took off. Most of the houses, like everybody else back in the day, they were all wells. The scheme took off, and after a short number of years, there was no treatment, obviously, with the starting up of that scheme. The water got discoloured fairly quickly, and I do remember the colour of it myself coming out. I remember the bats. It could be dirtier coming out of it than going into it nearly. But luckily enough, in 2004, 2005, they moved to a DBO, and we were one of the first DBOs. And what we have now is exceptional water. It's a credit to everybody that has gone, done all the work in the past. But I've come into it because the people that were volunteers, the chairperson and the secretary, they were doing all of the managerial work free of charge, and they wanted to retire out of the job. So the scheme got involved and decided maybe it's time to move. And So I'm employed
Yeah.
as a manager. So I take over all those day-to-day duties.
And how many houses have you got on your scheme now? How big is the scheme?
We have 470 houses, but in total we've about 900 connections.
Yeah.
So we're very 50-50, very rural, very agricultural based as well. Nearly every second house, is farming. We have a couple of very big dairy farmers on the scheme as well. So, we have our challenges. Capacity, of course, is one thing that we need to look at in the future. And, just protecting our source. We've done a huge amount of work in protecting our source. Seán has mentioned that, and I think that's going to be a theme that everybody will believe in here today with protecting the source.
Yeah, yeah. And Darragh, how about you now? What have you learned engaging with group water schemes? What?
Oh, yeah, from ICOS's point of view, I suppose it's really pleasing to see how and like my colleague Seamus said, how the group water scheme sector took to the co-op model, starting from that figure of 100 in '98. It now represents that figure that is there from 2022 now represents nearly 40% of the co-ops registered in Ireland.
Really?
And the coherence they've shown, the leadership that you've shown in your communities, even up to now with the work that's been done on source protection and biodiversity, working with every stakeholder in the various communities shows how the co-op model is great for a group of people deciding how they want the world to look like, their small little slice of the world to look like, and execute it together and put it together. And as well as that, the schemes and the Federation have shown that they're a great platform for innovation. And I'm not the only one saying it. The European Cooperative Award for Innovation in 2001, and that was given by COGECA, proves that, for that source protection measures and the various environmental measures that were being done. So the proof of the pudding is there, And just from my own dealings with the likes of, I see you there from our Rural Business Committee, and the various staff members that I deal with, that its importance for those rural communities, and the level of voluntary dedication that's shown as well, and an onerous task of running a business and supplying potable water to people is, to be undertaking that on a voluntary basis is admirable,
So you help the group water schemes with their legal requirements, is that what it is?
I suppose, it would be fundamentally, it would be in terms of compliance with their rule books, compliance with their annual reporting obligations, member relations issues, keeping board rotations right, looking at various little governance, day-to-day governance work, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That again, that's all learning for the staff and for the volunteers at the group water schemes. And I'm back to Mary again. I suppose, Mary, I'd like to ask you, we've come through 25 years, we've learned an awful lot, you've learned an awful lot, you've a great deal of skills built up. Like, water management is extremely difficult, it's extremely complex. Every single one of you on the panel will have different experiences because you'll have different sources and different protection needs and all of the rest. So, I suppose, what are the challenges going forward do you see for your organisation now, for your particular scheme?
Well, I think we'll have to change a bit. And there's a certain amount of letting go, because a lot of the people on the committee are the same people on the committee. And is it a kind of thing that we're afraid to let go? But we need to get more people involved. We need to get people involved in different areas. And we need a manager at this stage. Maybe we need to amalgamate. And they're all questions that you need to bring to the whole community. And it's about trying to get the whole community involved. And how you get the whole community involved is, it can be quite difficult. Years and years and years ago, when you were taking frogs out of break tanks, then you got people to come to meetings. But now, when people just expect water there and then, it's harder to get people. And we had a big issue recently, and we were out of water for a week on the scheme. So I was thinking that maybe we should have a meeting now, and maybe you'll get more people in now and try and get people interested. And maybe break it down into different jobs and say you might be interested in IT kind of thing, someone else might be interested in quality. And maybe that's the way to go and get people involved now. But I do think we have to change, and we need to bring more people in with us, make it a bigger community.
I think partly people often don't know where their water comes from. You know, an awful lot of people don't know, you know, that it's actually supplied by a group water scheme and not Irish Water. So I suppose they don't know that, and if they don't know that, they don't know that you're a volunteer organisation providing this.
We've had Irish Water telling the people on our scheme that, oh, there's no boil notice on it, when we have a boil notice on it.
Yeah. You see, I suppose it's, as somebody was saying earlier on, it's all about communication. And communication is very important, but then it's to have the skills to reach all of the people, because you have to do it in so many different ways now, because people don't read the local newspaper anymore.
I'm not that techie.
Yeah, it is a challenge. It is a challenge, even in small communities, to get messages out at a local level. Yeah. Seán, what do you think the challenges are?
Yeah, I can understand if everything is going well, and if water's in the top 7 days a week. People are busy, our members are very busy, so we get frustrated. The same as everybody. You send out 1,000 notices for the AGM, pledged to do that under the Industrial Province Societies Acts, and you're lucky if you can get 8 or 10 people along with the committee. Now, you can take that as a positive, that things are going very well. But I'd be very, based on a story, or based on an incident that happened in our own scheme. I think it was 1993, things were going quite well. We had to drill additional ground sources because we developed the ground source at the time. And Monaghan County Council then became very interested in this, and you might recall this yourself, Gretta, from the time. And Monaghan Town needed water. It was, in fact, there was a photograph that made it to the daily paper at the time, where there was literally only days left in the local lake where the town was getting this water from. It's a very dry summer, earlier that, sometime 78, 79. But in 93, the consultants, whom we had cooperated with because the consultant head geologist did a special report for the UDC at the time, and they estimated the aquifer that we were tapping out of it could be, and there various models in the report, that there could be up to 1 million gallons of water a day could be abstracted. But then the last paragraph said they may be underestimating this by a factor of 10. So you wouldn't have to have honours maths to figure out there could be 10 million gallons there. So we believed that ourselves, and we shared any information we had. In fact, we gave our own file, which is that depth, to the consultants. So our experience then began to show that some of our wells were being drawn down and below the foot valve, as it were. So the alarm bells started to go off with us, and so we approached the council. In the meantime, they'd come out to the same area, put down a few boreholes, and one of them particularly, they drilled it on Culture land. And when Culture came, they blamed us, which fair enough, I'd do the same thing. But we had done a major job on a well that was given, in old money, 60,000 gallons an hour. It was the epicentre of a wonderful one. We just pure luck that we came across it. And we're pumping roughly about 30,000, which somebody's faster on the maths than me, I'd probably tell them at 140 cubes an hour. So literally it could do the town as well as ourselves. But the water table level was dropping, and so the then county manager, gone to his awards since, God be good to him, but anyway, he had to sign off on a special certificate, even though the grants were paid directly by the department, and we were due £250,000. So that's a lot of money in 1993. But we were lucky we'd all paid for it. I think somebody misjudged it, that maybe we were seriously in trouble in the bank, but he wouldn't sign this anyway. So we had lobbied the councillors, the media got involved, and it featured on 6-1 News one evening on the 6-1 News in RTE. So we called a meeting, obviously, but we let the frustration build up a bit, and we called a meeting. I think there were about 500 people, and this is where, you know, if there's a crisis or if there's an issue, people will come out and defend. And all the councillors were there, and they all gave commitments to 3 of the TDs, and the manager still wasn't for moving. And some people were even out ringing him, letting them know the crowd that was there. And it was covered live by local radio. So we got a motion proposed by our treasurer, Lawrence McKenna, who is quite ill at the moment. But Lawrence proposed, notwithstanding all the great work, leave it be, we'd go back and collect 200 or 250 euro house in lieu of the grant aid. And it was unanimous, absolutely. And it was all over the radio the following morning. And the manager rang me and called me and he said, we're going to have to do something about this. But it's the people power. And somebody mentioned it this morning. You know, people are wonderful, and if you don't recognise, I think Seán Clerkin emphasised that time and time again. Now, there was an incident where they were overflowed, they were hanging out of the windows, and they were determined, man and woman, to say they're not taking our scheme. Actually, what he had said was they'd take over that large well, and we were to move west famous Cromwellian, we quoted that on the news at the time, sounded like Cromwellian, go west, my friend, and if we were a shortfall, they give it to us. Our own well that we developed and spent all that money on. So, and you can see, you know, when the Federation then, that was in 83, when Federation set up in 97, I think Barry mentioned that there was some reluctance by members, and we might have been part of that to say, well, look, if they had full control of the money, would we have ever got the quarters of millions? So that's an understandable fear. But the scheme from there on then went to success after that. But the point, I suppose, is we shouldn't get maybe too concerned that there's not big numbers maybe joining, but they're there, you know they're there, and they're very loyal people. And maybe, I think Mary mentioned as well, maybe old fellas like me should now really start and move off the stage, because you'll not get young people to come in and join, because Greta, you're on the scheme for years and Mary's on it and you're doing a great job. Why would I, if it was a younger person, why would I come in to try to threaten that? So I think this is for all of us, our age group, and I know there's quite a few of us here today that some of them, I talked to a man there earlier today, and he's 51 years involved in his group scheme. I'm 42, and I think that's incredible length of time. But I think we really should start looking at moving away, and this is true of the board of the National Federation as well. Great people that have done sojourn work and have been there through thick and thin, but the next 25 years are going to be extremely challenging. I talked about it this morning in the context of climate change, lack of biodiversity, and we had the whole pollinator issue. And young people are actually quite excited by that and quite involved in that. So I think I would encourage schemes, including our own, and I've already given notice to my own scheme that I'll be gone next year. And at that stage, we'd be advertising for obviously a younger type person. We've developed, as you know, an education centre in our own scheme recently, spent quite a lot of money on it, but we would hope to recruit somebody that would both manage the group scheme and manage the centre with a view to emanating and distributing education material. And we know the key is education and raising awareness. So I suppose on that note, I wouldn't be too despondent about members not coming in. You will get them in, but I would emphasise maybe more than anything else, if you get the right executive or the right management team and build up that trust. I think Barry had a slide there. What's about trust and cooperation equals equity, or equity and something equals trust. So if you get the trust of and you get good people onto the board that they recognise, that I think you will move mountains. But I'll finish on this, and I mentioned it this morning. I think rationalisation down the road is going to be the future. All of us, and I think Hugh Riley, where's Hugh? You had the front row here. Hugh had mentioned a number of years ago at the County Federation meeting. I remember the first day he ran it past me. He said, "Look, on even schemes in Monaghan, we probably have an average of 850 houses per scheme average. Some of them, Paddy Ward's scheme and our own scheme, over 1,000 and so on." But even there, I think we should be starting to look at rationalisation, because Irish Water is now the template that all governments and all politicians are going to look to that. And we're still, I'd say too many of us, that's not offending anybody in the room, quite the opposite. We've done a Trojan job, we've delivered a great service, but this is now 2023, and the challenge of climate change and biodiversity could swamp us. I think our sources are going to come under incredible stress. I hope I'm wrong. But all the best evidence is pointing in that direction. And I don't think in a voluntary situation we will be able to stand. We'll be doing a disservice to our schemes. And I know Barry and his team is very committed to that, starting off with Adrian down at Tipperary and the staff generally. But I think we should start thinking about that. And you don't have to amalgamate, just rationalise. I think there's a Pathfinder done in Limerick, 4 or 5 schemes, Tony, down in your area. Well, one management structure, one cooperative, and then you've clout. You've real clout in terms of the finances, in terms of the grants and subsidies, and deliver a proper service. Otherwise we could find ourselves in so. And I don't want to say this morning, I don't want to throw a sour note on. We're celebrating 25 years, yes, and it's been a great success. But you cannot. Somebody said earlier today, you can't sit on your laurels. You really have to think of tomorrow and next year, next week. So we wish you all the best in that.
I think it's about planning and thinking. This is, I suppose, an opportunity to think about the next 25 years. Yeah. What are the priorities and what the priorities should be, and what are the opportunities?
Yes.
You know, and it may be rationalisation, but I do see in the room a lot of expertise, and it's about passing that expertise on. I think that's a very, very important. It will be a very, very important thing for all of your schemes to get the young people in, to train them up, because water management is so complex. You know, and you have developed knowledge, and it's about sharing that knowledge before, you move on and you want to go on to other things. Shane, have you got anything to add then about the challenges or opportunities for the future?
Yes, I mean, the challenges that we have at the moment are going to be, greater in 25 years. So, I mean, we just look back to June of this year, the couple of weeks that we had of the very hot weather. Our plant was running 24 hours a day for 12 solid days. You know, I'm sure every manager sitting in here is always sweating under that. If you have a leak at that stage, you're in trouble. You don't want to be shutting down your plant. I look back over the few years of COVID, and I noticed the increase in water usage, people moving home. There isn't hardly a derelict house left in our village at the moment. They're all bought. People are moving back in. So our concerns would be usage and the supply. That would be our, main focus.
Yeah.
And the protection of that source. We're a lake source. It's our only source. Obviously you can increase your capacity in the DBO, but if our lake gets into a situation where it's not good enough, that's a huge challenge for us. So protecting that lake is the most important thing for us. So I think that's going to be our biggest challenge over the next 25 years, and supplying, keeping that supply up.
Yeah, and I know the CSO did, they've done an estimation, and they reckon the population across Ireland is going to increase between 20 and 40% in the next 40 years. So we have to be preparing for that extra demand.
I think just touching on something Seán said in relation to the youth, we visited both schools in our parish, and we have spoken to them, and they are so in tune with biodiversity and water and recycling, and that is where it starts. And in 25 years, the children that I've gone in and spoken to now, we hope that they will have as much interest in their local group water scheme as all the previous people in the 50 odd years of our own scheme have had, and to keep that encouragement up. I think that's vital, that we keep integrating them into the scheme, and hopefully that they will get involved. That's hugely important.
Yeah, I think that came across this morning. It was all about awareness, and if people know there is a problem or an issue, then they will start to take action. They know if they're talked to, as Seán was saying he talks to people, explains what the problem is, but then put in the resources to create the action so that you get the action as well. So people have to be supported to do what they need, and I think that's true with young people. Young people have to be supported, they have to be engaged with, they have to be told, and I think that's what's so great about Seán's centre, the education centre that he has up in North Monaghan. I went to visit it, it's absolutely fabulous, because I used to work with schools, and I used to have to take them out to the hedges. But of course, bringing schools out to a hedge isn't good, because there's lots of cars, it's not safe, there's huge things around risk assessments now with teachers. They want everything controlled. The insurance has to be covered. So somewhere like that, the new education centre, where they have all the trees and all the plants and everything's there, you just bring the children safely and you introduce them to them so they learn about it. It's so important. It's a very important tool to engage kids.
Just one quick thing to add to that. We have a number of schools visited the centre already, and I like talking to them to ask them, well, of course there's a lot of games for the very younger ones, and the games are water related, and so score points against each other, and some of that is sinking in, particularly around conservation. But I think kids and young people are ahead of us in terms of the climate change, and I don't want to bang on about it, but I think it's going to be huge. I think Seán Clerkin, particularly the Roscommon pilot project, I think he has brought out something there which is, I call it, there's a latent anxiety with the kids, but we're not encouraged to talk about it because we might frighten them and so on. But they're seeing it on the news regularly now. And what I found in the school visits when they walked around, I could do that. So we've a board with a pledge, and it might be a simple thing like giving 10% of the garden wilding. It might be to encourage mum and dad to stop spraying in the scenario. And I think I mentioned a few people today. We've about 1,000 members. Only 320 odd of them are farmers, and some of those are very small farms, as you know. So 2/3 of our scheme, I call them urbanites living in rural Ireland, which is great. So they bought their site, they put a leyland hedge around it and so on. But if you drive along those roads, even off the main road, the lawns are done like the 18th hole on a golf course. There's even these electrical gadgets, mowing them 24 hours a day. And so some of us have begun to start to let some of the lawn go wild. And including my own brothers that think I'm for the birds, or I think it was Donna who worked with us in the Federation back, Barry, I think she mentioned to you, she said her husband and her father, she was very enthusiastic, great lassie, and she said, they think I'm a fairy. But I think the children are way ahead of this. This is what I want to say. When we bring them into school and talk to them, they want to get involved in that. So we're actually going to expand it a little further, maybe to propagate seeds locally, to get a wet area, because kids love getting their hands involved. And I think that's where it's going to start. And I think Seán has proven that. Even before there was Common Project, we were involved with Kilmina, Seán, wherever you are now. But I think the Bee Project, isn't it interesting how that developed? Because if you concentrate always on water, maybe people get tired of it. But here was a sort of an add-on almost, and a benefit to it. And we emphasised this to the Minister, and Barry did at the meeting last night. They talk about the intangible assets, and people are familiar, certainly in the group schemes, about the options reports that's going to be done now on the new programme. And Luke and Dougie, I think they're still here in the audience. But I think what's possible, it's hard to define it sometimes, but I think the willingness of the group scheme sector, and I keep saying, Roscommon has demonstrated beyond anything that we could have dreamt of. The involvement that's in now, and the study that's being done that's going to be published, I think in the next month, Barry, I think it is, in terms of the wellness and people being involved in something rather than being isolated in rural Ireland. And here's an opportunity. We must have hope, because if we lose that, we're all done for. So there is hope, and I'd be very confident that if we can harness that through the children, that we can build on all of that, and we can make ever so slight changes. Because, and I'll finish here, if you think about it on our own scheme, if we ignore the 600 and visit the 300 farmers, and if I was a farmer, including two of my brothers that are farming, they'd say, well, when you start doing something with your own house? They do get up, and understandably so. But a quick story, I had about 4 or 5 people at the centre last week for a couple of hours. 3 of them were farmers. And so I was talking, like we're talking now, in a very casual way over a cup of tea. And I was saying what our plans are. We're going to concentrate. We're going to build a corridor from Tydavnet village, try to get everybody along that road down as far as the centre, particularly the households, to do something, to start not cutting the hedges the way they're doing them, leave the lawns go, for a major part, to try to get them to stop spraying stuff. And you could see the farmers relaxed in the room. And they said to me when they were leaving, that's the first time, they said, that anybody has ever begun to explain to them that there are other players out there in rural Ireland that could be doing as much damage, and maybe even more, to the water system, because that all seeps down into the ground. I think Seán Clerkin particularly brought that out in that project. And so I'd be very hopeful for the future, but equally I think that we must start talking about it, and it's linked directly, I think, as a colleague here on the left, Shane, about the source and in high temperatures, how that will go down. So we must start now to think about that, as you said, and I think there's tremendous hope. We will deliver it. I know the Federation and the board is very, very focused on this now, and I hope the department are listening to this, because while you can't quantify much of this in terms of euros or I think if we lose that, I think Dougie this morning acknowledged that very generously, that if you lose a group scheme because it's forced on Irish water for whatever reason, we lose the potential that we're just talking about to get that engagement in the catchment. We own the catchment. Somebody said that earlier today. We own the catchments. We're in the best position to help our members and help our neighbours to make those changes that will be sustainable into the future. So I think before a final decision made on any application, some of them are inevitable, they're not sustainable, maybe the source is wrong and it has to go off. But if it's sustainable at all, I think it should be supported, and maybe that extra grant, I think Dougie commit, they won't decide it solely on economic grounds. And that's heartening to hear that, because not everything is economics, as we know. People, I think you mentioned it yourself, people are so important, and we must respect that, and that word has been mentioned several times today. Sorry about that, I didn't want to.
No, well, actually, the research will say that if you can get 25% of the population working towards something, it's a tipping point that others get engaged because the information gets shared. And I think that's the most important thing I think that any of us can do, is to talk about the challenges. And for you, Shane, in your catchment, where you have real challenges of the source, you only have one source. It could be very dry in the summer, it could be very wet in the winter, and that has real challenges for managing that source so that it's safe for people to drink. So, it's a very complex thing for you to deal with, but it is about the catchment. It's not just about that water body, and it is about, and I think the what was his name, Douglas from the department said that the funding is going to look at environmental actions. It's not just going to be water actions, that you can actually do actions for climate and biodiversity as well, and that will be funded. And I would be, if I were you, I'd be holding him on to that. Like, I mean, that's a very, very important. It is about an integrated catchment approach, and the Fórum would be very much support that, looking at a whole catchment. You don't separate out water from climate, from biodiversity. It's all integrated. It's all the one thing. And any way you use the farm, or any time you use water, you're impacting on it. And it's about taking an integrated approach to it. So, but I think what you have all shown today and in your last 25 years of work is that you're leaders in this, and you're leaders within your community. And I think that we keep saying, the Fórum keeps saying, that we need to take an integrated approach. The climate officer, the biodiversity officer, the water officer all need to be working together, but they need to be working together and learning from the group water schemes, I think. So they're developing, for the new River Basin Management Plan, they're talking about developing community catchment fora, and I would hope that all the group water schemes would be involved with those community catchment fora, because it's all about protecting water. And it's in your interest that everybody else in the catchment protects water, because if it's your source, you need it protected. So it's about, I suppose it's integrating what's happening across the board. So Darragh, I didn't get to you. Do you have anything to add for opportunities in the next 25 years?
Yeah, I suppose, Seán has touched on it well there in terms of keeping people involved, and like we're seeing it in the other sectors that ICOS assists, where you're wondering who's going to be running the show in, never mind 25 years' time, in 10, 15 years' time. And I suppose convincing those potential people that, listen, this is your scheme, this is your co-op, you need to run it, or you basically you get the co-op you deserve, and that does involve doing a lot of work. That does involve finding someone to replace you, and that they could relate. There's a danger that they could maybe replace you sooner than you'd like, but I think there's a lot of work needs to be done, and we've been doing it with some of our co-ops now for a couple of years, and we're finding that the first move needs to be made by the co-op, and these people need a lot of coaxing to come in. And when they come in, when they are convinced, the engagement is great, and that idea of the using biodiversity as and the various pieces of action to bring younger people in, I think there's huge benefits from it, because obviously the scale it'll bring, and I suppose alleviating that thing of, they say that doomerism now is worse than denialism, that at least you're allowing people a way to have an impact, and and the co-op can be a vehicle for that, and but I think basically getting to your members, stopping short of harassment, I think, but getting to them and badgering them to come in, because I know I'm a 35-year-old with 2 kids at home, and I'm not going to get involved in any kind of committee or anything like that unless I'm given no choice. So I hope there's no one from a community group in South Tip is hearing that. But I think that is the reality when it's busy at home. So I think you kind of need a bit of badgering will be important.
Yeah, well, somebody said it earlier on today. It's about asking. You need to be asked.
You need
People
to be asked. Tap them on the shoulder.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, I was listening to the radio during the week, and they were talking about a 25% reduction in volunteering in sports across Ireland since COVID. There's a huge reduction in volunteering across the country. But I think if you're asked, it's very, very hard to say no, especially if you're asked by somebody who's been doing it for so long and has all the experience, and you can share the benefits of actually being engaged, But I think, I suppose my final question to the panel will be, what are your hopes for your group water scheme over the next 25 years? What would you hope, what would you like to see happen in the future for your scheme?
Well, I'd hope it to be resilient. I hope it's still there. I hope there is a community involvement. And that it's safe, it's in safe hands and it's safe water. Like as the others have said, we need to look at the whole bigger picture, but probably rationalisation will probably be involved in it. I'm not quite sure what else, but hopefully I won't be on the committee.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just there'll be change, but as long as it's good change, and you know.
Do you think that you'll need help if you were going to do, like, I mean, rationalisation has come up a lot. What has Barry got to do to facilitate rationalisation for the groups?
Barry's always harping on about it, so so I'm taking that from him.
That'll be on Barry's to-do list. How do we support groups?
Well, no, the support is there. It's about moving forward, and it's about being brave enough to move forward. Kind of in the country, communities can be very community, and it's this part, and it's not, say, where I live. In our football team, our GAA team is over 2 parishes. Our soccer team is over 2 counties. So, you know, the whole lot, the schools are in, the school where my kids go to is in a different county. So, like, but still, Ballinafad is its own little area. So there's this thing about, oh, well, this is our area and that's the next area. But it's about, you have to look at a bigger picture, and, you know, as long as you have a good source and a good thing coming out of the tap, you're fine.
I think you have to give local people the opportunity to solve their own problems, and I think that's where public participation comes in. It's when there's an issue. So as you were saying, Seán, never waste a good crisis, you know, to get people in and get people engaged. But if there is an issue, it's easier for them to come out. But if they don't perceive an issue, it's harder, because it's like everybody's busy. So why do you need me? Like, so I suppose it goes back to tapping the shoulder and asking.
Yes, I think.
But I think everybody would want good water and sustainable water resource going forward. And I think one thing that Shane has sort of alluded to maybe, and Seán as well, around demand management is something that doesn't come into our vocabulary very much. And it is something that we really do need to be thinking very, very much about in the next 25 years. We need to reduce our demand, you know, and think about ways of saving water. And not only that, if you're getting floods, you know, if everybody has a water bot, even just to slow the flow in the catchment so there's less flooding downstream, that's a big issue, you know. So, and sustainable urban drainage and all of those kind of measures need to be put in place as well. So maybe sustainable urban drainage is something that schemes could be thinking about for funding. I'm thinking about spending all that money that's available.
And not everyone needs treated water.
Not
everything needs treated water.
Absolutely. To think that we're using expensively treated drinking water to wash our cars and power hose our streets and our sheds and things, it's mad, like, you know.
I think as well, Greta, some of the schemes don't have an option. They simply have to go because there is no public means within miles of them, kilometres. So those schemes are going to have to find a way of managing that into the future. And if you have key people working for, Claire Sherlock, our secretary, is here today. If she would have up your hand, Claire, then she's a very quiet person like myself. She doesn't like the limelight. But with the bulk meters and the modern telemetry, compared to when we started the scheme all those years ago, Claire can get a text at wee hours in the morning, and the maintenance people are on that the next morning with DMAs and so on. And so we have to do that. Somebody mentioned it yesterday, I think, over dinner last night or whatever. It's an everyday job. If you fix a leak today, you just can't go home and head off. A leak will turn up possibly sometime later on that day or the next day. So it's the key people that you employ, the train, and you must pay them. I've had some discussions with schemes, and I can understand it because they're all working voluntary. And they're not, first of all, I don't think they're charging enough for a valuable product. It's been taken for granted. I think, but we can't do anything about this. The fact that there's free domestic water didn't help our scenarios into the thing. But that's a reality. The Oireachtas to a man and woman has decided that. That's unlikely to ever change. But I think that there should be a reasonable charging regime. You should follow up. It is a business. Like, we have somebody has a large leak, we give them a chance to pay it over a period of time. We never let anybody off it, in the sense that they learn the lesson once, but we're flexible. And that's kept confidential. That doesn't go to the board. So if I have a serious leak, that I know and we're informed that my name will never be before the board. And that's the way the board wanted it. They didn't want to know that. So that's left to the management and to make the arrangements, whatever it is. But the bottom line is everyone pays for whatever they use or that lost it or whatever. So I think that's a big element. Those schemes don't have a choice. They're going to have to survive. Other schemes are going to be marginal. But we'd encourage them to continue on that. And I say Barry, Jean and Joe, the management of the Federation, are continuing with great training programs around this now. And that's going to be the future, without a doubt. So I said earlier, hope. I would have hope. I'd be very confident that we would be able to do this. And I'd be very confident that the case to the department will ensure that happens. But can I say finally, there are an awful lot of things that happen, and again, I'm sorry if I keep coming back to Roscommon, but I was familiar with the details of that as I went along. Much of the work they've achieved didn't cost anything. For example, the bee led a bee campaign and planted a tree in a pesticide-free. So I think too much was in the past, emphasis was on waiting on grants from central government to come down. And I do know this, and it's not any great secret. I think many schemes have built up, and we encourage that as a federation, so as not to be caught for the rainy day. But I think that they should now seriously look at those reserves that they have, start spending them on the context of conservation and around now climate change and biodiversity. I think there's a very bright future for our land. There's fabulous people living there. And if you tap some of those on the shoulder, don't look around. I don't think you'll elect people at an AGM. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you'd have to have some idea, I think, of inviting so many people to the AGM and try to get more gender balance, because I think I shared, and I'll definitely shut up after this, when we're doing amalgamations, many of us were our ilk men folk that we had done the job, and the tradition was man worked outside the home and the one raised the kids and so on. But we used to go around and tap again in the community where we're trying to amalgamate, and we'd learn from ask the locals who could influence events here. And I saw it happening more and more time. This is not sexist, but it started happening more and more time when the debate was going on. Guys were arguing about all sorts of things. A lot of times it could be football or whatever. And then a young lady will stand up, mother of 3 or 4 kids, and say, sorry, excuse me, Chairman, I just want to ask one question. Because we'd be after running the presentation, Joe or somebody would be doing it, and we'd be saying, DBO is going to be this, you're going to 100% for the treatment plant, and there's going to be X, Y. I said, I've only one question. Can you guarantee that if we do this, if we amalgamate, and if we join this bigger entity, and the DBO goes in, that I will have water 24 hours a day of a quality that myself and the kids can drink? And I had no hesitation, or Joe and all of our staff saying, yes, we can guarantee that. Slightly risk. And she proposed it immediately, seconded, and the thing was carried unanimously. We could have been debating it to now if we hadn't gone down that road. So I think we need to involve more of the family type people in that, and that I think a lot of us men should, and I've said this earlier at the risk of repeating it again, I think we should encourage ourselves to move sideways and invite a younger generation. They will come in. I'm totally confident they will.
Yeah, very good. So that's your hope for the future, that there's a lot of young people involved. Shane, have you any hopes now for your scheme going forward?
Plenty of hopes.
Yeah.
Look, the big hope is obviously that the scheme will still be there in 25 years and it's operating as good as it is now, and that we're producing clean water. And that the hope would be that, as I mentioned earlier, maybe some of those young boys or young girls that we've spoken to last year in the school will be taking over my job, and they'll be on €5 a kilometre for mileage, and
and a big pension as well.
Big pension, yeah.
Be out on bikes.
But yeah, look at it. We've done a huge amount of work in source protection over the last 3 years, and the engagement that we've had with the farming community in particular was just unbelievable. And I would hope that could be rolled out. I'd love to see our whole catchment fenced off and buffered and protected. That would be an amazing thing to have done in 25 years. And it could take that long. It mightn't be done in that time at all, but if we can continue in the trend that we're going at the moment in the scheme, because the works that we have done has generated a huge amount of talk. Mm-hmm. And the first farm that we fenced off, that particular individual got talking to his friends, and before we knew it, we had 7 or 8 different farms involved. And it was excellent. It was really excellent. And I'll just finish with this. The chairman and I always say there's a story at every single meter box. You know, historic, some good, some sad, you know, and that hopefully we'll be able to produce more stories going forward, you know, that'll be good, because people they're brilliant. I found it in my short time in 3 years that they're so helpful, and they'll bring you into the house, they'll explain, you know, where their water is going. Some of them will say there's a stream coming down through my land here, and it's going down this particular field and it's ending up in that river and so on. And they've been hugely engaging. So don't finger point. Bring people together and bring people along. That's my message for the future anyway, and my hope that they will come along with you.
Well, I would have to say I share your hope that every single catchment will have buffer strips and fencing and all of that kind of thing so that water is protected in every catchment across the country. We'd all love that, you know. But I do think you have to meet farmers where they're at. And I used to ask, I worked with LawPro before I came to the Fórum, and I used to go out and talk to ICA groups, all that kind of thing, and I'd say, where's your local water body? Where's your local river? And they'd be thinking, gosh, it's 3 or 4 miles down the road, it's that lake or that river. And I was thinking, did you ever think about the shop at the backyard? Like, you know, because that is people's local stream. It's that little drain that you didn't notice. That's your local waterway. Actually, your water comes into your house, it comes into you. It's, you know, we're all part of it. It goes through us every single day, the water from our catchment. And we forget that. You know, it's pumped out of the catchment into our taps, and we drink it. And then it goes right back out again. Anyway, but we have an intimate relationship with the water that we do tend to forget. Darragh, have you anything to add now? What's your hopes? You have 2 young kids.
Yeah, so I'll be a couple of years off retirement, so I hope they're still around and sending me work.
It'll all be on your shoulders.
Like, I suppose the lads make a valiant effort to trying to educate me on how the mechanics of water supply actually happens. So I'm not going to pretend to be an authority on that. But what I do know is that having a stake in something as important as the supply of your own water, not just and not just a body that does it, actually being able to determine how it's done, and that'll be critical. It's critical today. It'll be critical in 25 years. It'll be critical in 250 years. So, you know, there'll always be a place for group water schemes in that regard. And that's, you know, I suppose maintaining the efforts that you're talking about now, because it's going to become more and more important to be able to stand up and credibly say, yes, we represent our users, we represent this area. And we look like the people from this area. We are the people from this area. So, you know, your age profile, your gender balance, it isn't just the right thing to do. There's obviously that practical reason for it, and to keep the work up there at that. And that'll be my 30 cents worth on it anyway.